Elliot, good to have you on the show. This is Rocky Giglio. I'm the host here on Cloud and Clear. And for those tuning in regularly, you know that we're here talking about all things cloud and SADA, and we're bringing in our customers and partners and friends. And so, Elliot, it's great to have you on the show today. You are CIO at OANDA. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me here. Really, really happy to be here and speaking to your audience. This is actually my podcast debut. I think this is the first podcast episode that I've ever been on any podcast. So really, really excited for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you got that right. I'm the Chief Information Officer at OANDA. So for those that don't know, OANDA is a company, global, founded in Toronto in 1996 in the sort of fintech space. So we really started all around currency data and sharing currency data with the masses, with sort of retail traders, and sort of expanding beyond, at the time, the access that only kind of large institutions had to that data. So it's really kind of based around democratization of data. Since then, we've grown quite substantially. We have offices and operate in many countries around the world: New York, Toronto, Singapore, Poland, London, Tokyo, Sydney, all the major financial centers of the world. So I've been at OANDA here for 3 years, just over 3 years. Was brought in after OANDA was acquired by a private equity firm called CVC, and brought in to grow the organization, scale it, responsibly and sustainably, to deliver lasting value for our investors, of course, for our private equity owners, but also for our customers.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, that's a great industry. And you mentioned data democratization. I mean, digital transformation, kind of three tenets of digital, right? Data democratization, access to any, from anywhere, so, and then modern infra, obviously there's some other things there, but so it's neat to hear you say that relative to the fintech space, right? Like there's so much going on there. I think everybody is trading now in some way, shape, or form, right? You got companies like Robinhood and these others that are popping up and making apps. And so the market, I think, is just super different than it has been. So it's neat to hear that, hey, here we are. And you said you're kind of global now, right? So you've got trading, I guess I'm assuming trading options in all those countries that you listed. And so it's not just, here's some data, go have fun with it. But tell us a little bit about what OANDA's doing with that data and what your customers are getting out of that.
Yeah, good question. So, first on trading, while we were born out of sort of currency data, our trading offering has expanded to be quite broad. So, of course, foreign exchange trading was sort of our legacy and our core, but we've since grown to CFDs, contracts for difference, on shares, crypto, commodities, bonds, all, of course, depending on the market and what is allowed in each jurisdiction. So yeah, we have grown quite substantially. I mean, data is a huge sort of value add for us in growing the business, right? As it is probably for pretty much every company in every industry. Understanding our data, digging into data, deriving insights from that, and using that to deliver better services to our customers in the right place at the right time, is a huge, has been a huge benefit to our business, but also is certainly a huge opportunity. There is a lot more that we can do with the data that we have. For our customers, I think that is true there as well. I think, trading, whether it's an exchange-based trading platform or instrument, or whether it's over-the-counter like many of our instruments are, so it's almost like peer-to-peer trading, right? Information is power. Right, the more information you as a customer have to make a better informed decision, to make a better risk informed decision in trade, ideally the better outcome for you as a trader. So we do try to deliver that to our customers. I mean, our motto is literally smarter trading. So we try and empower our customers with data and with access to information that they might not otherwise, have easy access to at their fingertips to really make it. We like to make it. What's the word that I'm looking for? Seamless, I suppose. For customers to make the right decisions. So that's really kind of how we look at data, and the cloud obviously plays a very big part of that. There is so much information that we're generating. There's so much information that the market is generating. So getting all of that into one place into a format that we can sort of distill those insights and make those decisions and deliver to our customers is something that we realized very quickly is not possible in sort of our legacy traditional on-premise environments, which is one of the many reasons that sort of led us to the cloud.
Yeah, very cool. So what was the biggest challenge? I mean, when I think about that type of data and in that industry, right, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of history. So usually that brings like, hey, don't touch my, don't move my cheese kind of mentality, right? Like how much of a challenge was that for you guys as you're looking at bringing the insights, collecting all that data? The technical stuff obviously is I'm sure something we should dive into here a little bit, but what was the biggest challenge for you guys just as you were bringing this to market, pulling this data together and starting to deliver it to customers? Like, did you run into challenges with even inside of OANDA, just, hey, what about this? Or, hesitation in doing the democratization of that, of those assets?
Yeah, I think, it is certainly a complex challenge for a variety of reasons. First of all, OANDA is a long-lived, established brand. Like I mentioned, we've been around since '96. Again, with any company in any industry, there's a lot of sort of debt that's generated over the years, right? So when we look at how our internal teams and our products were consuming data across the organization, there's a spider web of dependencies. There's 20 some odd years of history there. So it really is a complex challenge to understand that landscape, and then to sort of get buy-in, get everybody on board and execute a large-scale migration to not only a new platform being, the cloud, but it's different, right? Like for us to really get the value out of the cloud and having our data on the cloud, and again, doing the transformations in the cloud, delivering those insights from the data in the cloud, it's a fundamentally different model, right? So not only are we replatforming, it's not like, okay, point from this URL to this URL now and everything's exactly the same. It truly is different. So that's a challenge that's not to be kind of understated, right? There are other challenges, of course, that again I'm sure most industries are facing, which is we have to be very thoughtful about what we can and cannot do with what data. There's obviously data that is protected under GDPR. There's data that we have certain obligations to use or not use in certain ways, whether that's regulatory obligations or moral or ethical obligations to our customers. So being mindful of that is obviously really crucial to the success of this type of initiative. And I think really requires a very strong and prescriptive view of data governance. And I mean, this all ties in, right? Like the cloud helps with that, those foundational elements in understanding your data landscape, understanding where and how things are flowing and in what form is certainly foundational to be able to make informed decisions on how to use the data, when, where, and what's appropriate in that context.
Yeah, and you've said it earlier, right? Cloud, it really unlocks that capability, and that's something that I've seen, time and time again, where you could do this in a data center, but now you're buying for this unknown capacity, and it becomes expensive and difficult to manage as you grow and as you continue to operate. And so, of course, starting in 1996, what other choice did you have, right? And so there's this transition, not just in the what you're going to do with the data, but also in the mindset of around how you're going to manage and operate that. So as you guys were looking at cloud and making that migration, what was the thing that helped push you over the edge? Like, what was that carrot that everyone's like, you know what, this is the why. This is what's going to get us to that next level with our customers and with our private equity firm, whatever, right? Like, this is the return here.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say that the strength of the product offering in the data space on Google Cloud was a huge selling point for that. When I look at how we were handling, transforming, ingesting, serving, warehousing, whatever data on-prem, it was a collection of a bunch of disparate tools that fit for some use cases, but didn't fit for others. One of the really strong advantages of Google Cloud's suite of data products is that a lot of it is managed. So we don't necessarily have to make a decision on, okay, are we running a columnar database, or are we running a well-structured relational database? Are we streaming event data between systems or not, and like all of those decisions, which historically would be based on the licensing cost of those tooling, the overhead of buying and maintaining servers and those applications on the servers. It's a lot easier on Google Cloud, because it is much more sort of pay as you go, to say, okay, well, this data is a very good fit in BigQuery, which I truly believe is best in class in at what it does. We can also have data in an unstructured format in GCS and do a lot of cool things with that. When we look at things like Cloud Composer and data flow and Dataproc and all of these great tools where there's really no overhead in sort of getting our developers and our data team access to those tools, it allows us to be a lot more nuanced and specific and fit for purpose in where we are storing and processing and serving data from.
Yeah, and I think you hit a key there, which is more flexible, like almost effortless ability to say, hey, we need to do this and we need the right tool for it. And cloud really allows that flexibility to say, okay, for this use case, I need this thing. How are you guys handling the challenge of the number of tools, right? So cloud, to your point, is wonderful in that we can say, hey, I've got this specific challenge here, and there's probably some service inside of GCP that I could go pull that's going to make this easier. But that's a new service. It's got new configuration items. It's got, there's all these things that go along with that, especially from a security perspective, something you said earlier, which is, we're pulling in all these different data assets. And it's really unlocking the value of those data assets as we combine them and do analytics on them, and then you're providing that back to your customer. There's also this challenge of, well, we got to know where that data came from and what the rules are around that data. And so when you start opening up into cloud, has these various platforms and offerings and services that we can leverage, and there's lots of value in that. How are you managing the other side of that challenge, which is, okay, there's a real security concern here on how those things get configured and deployed and operated, as we start rolling them into our application platforms?
Yes, that is also a very good question, and a challenge that occupied a lot of my thinking as we were sort of embarking on this journey. And I would say this is not specific just to data products on Google Cloud, right? This is general. When we shift from an on-prem paradigm to a cloud-based paradigm, there is a whole host of tools. Even if we look at things like Cloud Functions or Cloud Run, that of course they can be used in a data capacity, but more generally, they're just novel ways of running infrastructure that really don't exist, or historically were difficult to provide, certainly at a smaller scale on premise. It's a fundamentally different model for the developers to adopt, model for our infrastructure teams to support, and a very different security model. So, I would say it was not and is not a free-for-all. Like, as much as I would love to give our developers access to everything in Google Cloud, because I think there's a ton of opportunity there, it does have to be sort of rolled out in a structured and managed way. So, quite frankly, when we started, aside from a couple of the data products like BigQuery that we felt like we understood very well, or that we were working with partners like SADA that helped us adopt best practices and things like that on those tools, and for which there was obviously a very clear incentive for the reasons that I mentioned earlier in its comparison to on-prem tools. We definitely started with projects that were easy to run on the cloud in an on-prem like fashion, right? It was like dip your toe in the water, get used to working with the cloud in a model that you're familiar with, and then slowly adopt more tools and sort of build on that foundation as you go. So it's not like, the fire hose of, okay, you've got all these new tools, your security team is trying to figure out how to work with everything at once. So I would say that in terms of a rollout strategy was how we approached that. And then, of course, there are a number of sort of processes and controls that we put in place on top of that. So everything that we're running in the cloud is in Terraform. So it gives us an opportunity through our sort of change management and release management process to give our infrastructure teams visibility, to give our security teams visibility into what tools our development teams are leveraging as they're building and deploying their applications. We also rely on a number of sort of third-party services, many of which are available in the Google Cloud Marketplace to help us secure those workloads. So tools like Sneak, which has been really, really great and really useful at evaluating the infrastructure through infrastructure as code, evaluating the applications, helping, I would say, it certainly doesn't replace the value that the security team brings in, engaging with the development teams to ensure that they understand how they are deploying their workloads and what pitfalls might come with that, but certainly augments their ability to do so. Things like CSPM tool, or Cloud Security Posture Management tool, is also very valuable in that. And then finally, of course, partners. So working with partners like SADA or Mandiant, who really understand the cloud security model and can help us make sure that we're doing things safely and securely, but also efficiently, and adopting best practices without having to go through that learning experience ourselves. It was also part of that rollout strategy, and thus far seems to have paid off and worked very well for us.
Yeah, I think you hit the kind of three major themes. When I'm talking to customers, you talk about the three core tenets of good security practice, right? One is know everything. So that's your logging, that's your SIEM, that's your CSPMs, right? We need to know what's happening inside our infrastructures and environments, and bringing that telemetry from our apps so we know what normal looks like. So there's kind of that first tenet. The second one is, trust nothing, right? So leverage these tools, especially in the cloud world, where we can build in such a way where on premise it would be overly complex to have isolation from node to node inside of a cluster, or VMware hosts, or even virtual machines inside the data center. Well, those days are gone, right? Everything's code driven. Mm-hmm. You mentioned using Terraform to do all that, so we can bring layers of isolation and security that we couldn't do before in the cloud, right? And so there's that kind of that second tenet, which is the trust nothing. Just because they're on the network doesn't mean I like you, right? You got to earn my trust every time we talk, and that's a different model, right? I mean, especially in what you guys are doing, where the old model was, hey, I've got this front end app server or middleware server, and it's allowed to touch this database. It's allowed to pull that data from that database, and so, well, just because it's the middleware server doesn't mean we trust it, right? And so you can add these layers of security now with cloud that we couldn't do before. And then you mentioned the third layer, the third tenet, which is automation, right? Terraform code, driving configurations through pipelines so we can do checks on those things, front ending it with things like Sneak, where you're scanning those containers and the things that are going into your repos and making sure that they're secure from day one. So you're not deploying stuff out into a cloud environment that, yes, is infinitely scalable, but we can also very quickly get into trouble if we took something that was bad at the beginning and then multiplied it times 1,000 and threw it out in the world, right? And so, yeah, I think those three things, and you hit all of them as you were running down, like, this is how we had to do this, right? Is the key areas to doing that well. And then, the last kind of the wrapper around all that is checking it, right? Making sure that we're doing it right, because stuff happens, stuff slips through the cracks, new threats, pop up all the time, and so how do we know that we're doing the right things? And that's for sure where SADA, you mentioned Mandy, and a great partner of ours. We're bringing those things to our customers and able to say, hey, yeah, this is great. Let's take that next step. Let's move this maturity score forward. So very, very cool.
Yeah. I will say just one thing that came to mind as you were speaking there. Google does a very good job of sort of secure by default to a level. Certainly not. You can't expect to deploy any workload and have everything 100% secure out of the box, because obviously it's very specific and unique and tailored to what you were trying to do. But compared to an on-prem model where it was a very traditional perimeter-based security model, the fact that it is much more secure by default, you have to sort of deliberately have things talking to each other, open things up to the outside world where obviously necessary for business functionality or whatever, is certainly a shift in mentality, but a big benefit. And not just from a security perspective, I would say from a maintainability perspective, and from keeping tabs on your environment and making sure that you understand what is going on and what's supposed to be going on there, is really invaluable. I mean, when we were speaking earlier around the challenges of migrating data to the cloud, and all of the consumers of the old sort of on-prem thing, a lot of that was born out of, a lot of that challenge was like, oh, like, we didn't know that this team was using this data. It's like, well, yeah, we've been doing it for 15 years. And it's just like, okay, well, like, how, oh, well, we were on the same on the same network, and things like that. Whereas those decisions have to be made much more deliberately. There are guardrails in place to sort of prevent, again, not even just from a security perspective, but prevent things like that from happening that you don't know about. Making sure that that goes through the infrastructure team, the security team, the data team, is well thought out. Is also sort of a secondary benefit, I would say, that we didn't necessarily specifically target as an objective, but we were pleasantly surprised, and I've been quite happy with the value that that's brought as well.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of cloud, right? Is it does force us to think differently and have a different operating model. And if you do it right, kind of to your point, right, there's a lot of value in that, right? Because now we're talking and we know what's happening and why it's happening, and so it's not just this thing sitting out here. We don't really know who uses it. Man, if I had a dollar for every time, I just do the migrations and then said, hey, what's this system for? And somebody said, I don't know, it's just been running. Like, can't find the owner, don't know what it's for, right? And I think those days are gone. And cloud forces that, because the more you mature your cloud practice, the more you're going to be forced to say, well, what is this for, and why do I need it, and build that into your Terraform code on the left side, so that as it goes out, you know why it's there, right? Things that you just didn't do before on-prem. So that's super exciting. So, all right, in the last couple minutes of our episode here, I got some fun stuff. Everybody's talking about ChatGPT, Bard, all these things that are going on out there. In fact, I saw a YouTube video yesterday, using ChatGPT to guide my trades, do my investments for me. And, I think the title of the video was, I gave ChatGPT $30,000 and had it invested, right? What's going on there? How do you see that impacting what OANDA's doing, and what are you guys looking at? And then what's, for you in that trend, like what's exciting, what scares you, what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. It has been a very frequent topic of conversation in the industry and in our organization, for sure. I would say that first, on what's exciting, I think it plays very well with OANDA's ethos, right? The smarter trading and that democratization of data, and not just of data, but democratization of the markets and access to the markets is a really cool opportunity here. Again, when we sort of first got into sharing currency information, where previously it was just sort of institutional, when we look at not just with OANDA, but in the industry in general, this huge shift and outsized interest from retail traders and retail investors in the past, call it 2 or 3 years, that's really exciting, because it sort of levels the playing field, right? And I would say that generative AI helps to push that even further. When we look at some of the functionality that we offer, and we have an API, which is a huge asset to us, is something that our customers love. Some of the white label trading platforms that are very common in our industry, there's one in particular called MetaTrader. It lets our customers develop their own scripts or bots, if you will, to perform trades in line with their strategy. And that's really cool, obviously, and that's a good advantage. But there's still a barrier to entry, right? There's a barrier to entry in that you need to know how to code in order to adopt that and to gain whatever advantage or perceived advantage that those types of automations may bring to you. So something like generative AI, one of the frequent topics of conversation is, as you mentioned, in people using it to develop trading strategies. The output of that often is code, right? People will be like, hey, write me a program in Python that trades in accordance with whatever principles they feed into it. And again, I think in principle that's really cool because it helps serve to democratize and bring broader access to the tools that, again, hopefully help our customers succeed. I would say what scares me a little bit, and the flip side of that is that again, as you've probably seen, as many of the listeners have probably seen in the news, ChatGPT, Bard, they all sometimes get it wrong. Right? There was an article that I read 2 days ago. Yeah, there was an article that I read 2 days ago that I think it was the Washington Post was responding to the fact that ChatGPT had referenced an article that they wrote, but they never actually published or wrote an article that ChatGPT was referencing.
Nice.
And, I think as a customer, if you are using ChatGPT or something to develop a trading strategy, you really need to know and understand the risks that you're assuming, right? And that's a bit of a challenge for us. I mean, we have, again, a moral and ethical and regulatory obligation to make sure that we are acting in the best interests of our customers, that we're protecting our customers, and that they are fully informed of the risks that they are making. And that becomes much more challenging when they're using a tool to drive their trading decisions that's outside of our control, right? Yeah. So, when definitely excited about the broader access, with the caveat that, I think you will see either what I would love to see is a shift towards sort of more programmatic literacy in the general population, so that people can at least read through a Python program, understand what it's doing, to have that sort of check and balance to make sure that, okay, this matches what I've asked it to do. What I hope doesn't happen, but we've seen a little bit of, is kind of a nascent but growing distrust of generative AI, right? And I think that if that is the general direction and that perception grows, which I'm sure the folks at OpenAI and Google with Bard and things are thinking a lot about, because they're obviously well incentivized to make sure that these applications succeed in the market. I hope that we can get to a place where they are more accurate, higher quality, and there is that trust, again, so that we can get to broader access and more democratized access to these types of tools.
Yeah. So what I heard you say as a father is teach your kids to code.
That's right. Yeah.
That's going to be
a big advocate
no joke, right? I mean, our children are going to grow up in a time where, to your point, right? Okay, you've got this trading strategy that ChatGPT wrote, and it gave you the script, and you can get value out of that if you know how to code, right? But then also, even if you don't, just having a general sense and understanding of that code is going to help whether what you're about to do is going to lose all your money or not. Or I gave $30,000 and now I have 10. That's not a good trade.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. Elliot, been a pleasure to talk to you, man. Thanks for joining me here on Cloud and Clear. For those of you tuning in, please subscribe down below, like this episode, and let Elliot know that we're glad to have him on. And again, man, thanks so much for joining us. Loved hearing about what you guys are doing there at OANDA, and glad to have you as a customer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much, Rocky. Really appreciate the opportunity. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @CloudandClear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.